Hello and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I'm Will Polston. This is episode number 116. In this episode, we're going to be talking about reviewing the year. So 2021, I think, let's face it, for most of us, hasn't been the year we expected it to be once again for obvious reasons. But one of the things I think is really important that we do is we stop and review the year. Now, over the past decade or so, I've become a big fan of reviewing as I go along. There's a process I like to do on a monthly basis where I review the previous month, which we'll touch on in a second. But one of the things that I've been doing, and I now do with my clients whenever I start working with clients, and it's a really wonderful process to do at the end of the year, is something called an annual self-assessment. Something I've coined an annual self-assessment. I don't mean doing your tax returns. So for me, the annual self-assessment consists of two parts. So the first is actually 28 questions that I've taken from Napoleon Hill, and it's a really great way of reviewing yourself, what you've done, how you've performed. And I'm actually going to put the link to this particular document in the show notes so you can get access straight to it. But it covers some really key things, like whether you achieve your objective for the year, your level of quality of how you've operated, the quantity of how much you've done, have you been harmonious in your spirit, have you procrastinated, have you been persistent, decision making. It gets you to look at whether you are cautious, overcautious, undercautious, whether you've been pleasant or unpleasant. It gets you to identify whether you've been concentrating or not. It gets you to identify whether you've been open-minded or not, whether you've been able to whether you've been egotistical. So there's lots of really great questions that it asks you. And the great thing about knowing this information is that when you have this really honest conversation with yourself by asking these questions, you can then make a conscious decision whether you want to change that moving into the up and coming year. So it's a really, really great process to use when it comes to identifying and moving forward into any future year. So I actually started doing this, like I say, probably 10 or maybe even 12 years ago. And I actually used to take a whole day out in between Christmas and New Year, and I'd sit down and I'd work through it, because at the same time I used to set my goals on that at that period of time as well for the following year, which we're going to be talking about in a future episode that's going to be coming out next week, or you can jump straight into it if you're listening to this early in the new year, on creating your goals for the future year. So there's some really great questions. One of the things that it asks you is, what did I accomplish? And this is moving into the part of the annual self-assessment. Now, one of the really great things to do, if you're anything like me, you're an ambitious, driven individual, you're constantly thinking about the next thing. What's next? What's next? What's next? And one of the things that I love doing is answering this question by going on my phone, scrolling back to my photos at the beginning of the year, and literally scrolling through my photos, because typically anything that is a real moment we take a photo or screenshot of. So going through this process and writing down all of your accomplishments is a really wonderful exercise to do. Equally, writing down what were your disappointments, so things that didn't go to plan, things that didn't go the way you want them to, again, because once you've got that self-awareness, you can decide to do something different about it in the following year. One of my favourite questions is, what did I learn? So what are the new things that you learned about yourself? It might be new knowledge. It might be new things that you learn about other people, learn about yourself. And then another great question is, how do you limit yourself? So these are some really great questions that it asks you as part of the annual self-assessment. So we're going to pop that in the chat box so you can get stuck in and go and use this for yourself. It's a simple but really effective tool, and I highly recommend that you use it. I'll put the link in the show notes. You can head straight to it and start using it now. And obviously, this is the last podcast before Christmas, so I wish you a very Merry Christmas and look forward to being able to share more wisdom with you, with our guests, and from insights of my own moving into the new year. Until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.